الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. We continue inshallah ta'ala with باب البر والصلة. The next hadith is hadith Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-As رضي الله تعالى عنهما. قال in this hadith رضا الله في رضا الوالدين وسخط الله في سخط الوالدين. This is hadith straightforward. So Allah's pleasure is in the parents' pleasure, in the parents' obedience or pleasure. And Allah's displeasure is in also the parents' displeasure. In this translation he put, this is, I give you that just the word by word translation. However, قال في رضا الله في رضا الوالدين. The pleasure of Allah result from the parents' pleasure. And the wrath of Allah upon a person result from also the displeasure of that resulted or result from the parents' displeasure. فهذا حديث عام. This is a general hadith. Absolute in its meaning, which is need kind of let's say the element to, because it had the nature of mujmalun, ambiguous in a way that is the displeasure or the wrath of the of the anger of the parents means the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it depends on the circumstances. So we cannot put this as regardless in any other action. And we're talking about Muslim, we're not talking about the mushrik, because the mushrik, we know, قَالَ وَإِنْ جَاهَدَكَ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تُشْرِكَ بِي شَيْئًا فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا. If they're striving you, pushing you, forcing you to associate partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then do not obey them, but treat them nicely and kindly. But there's subhanAllah in some people, they understand the hadith in absolute, which is like without any element to be associated with the qarina to put it in the right perspective. So I said, if the mother says things, you have to obey it with no discussion, and if you do not obey it, it's like your path is the wrath of Allah, therefore is Jahannam. And that's wrong. So there's people subhanAllah, they use their status of being parents are becoming tiring with the family. And that's not allowed. That's dhulm. That's dhulm. But on the other hand, does not mean that a person should neglect it to the point that he will, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, get to and attain the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's read the comment and inshallah, or the sharh, and then we have our comments on that. فقال هذا الحديث أولا دليل على وجوب رضا الوالدين. So we have to look at it from one perspective, which is unanimous, that this hadith show us, or like a dalil and evidence on the obligation of pleasing the parents or honoring the parents, and the prohibition on doing the opposite thing. And this is known by the Quran. وَقَضَىٰ رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا. Your Lord decreed that you only worship and you treat nicely and kindly and honoring the parents. And there is very important things, because here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put His name with the name of the parents before the name of the parents. Subhanallah. Because Allah's gift to the human being, to have a life, He came through the chain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had will to be. Allah khalaqakum min turabin. Allah created you originally from dust, from clay. طين. قال ثم دعا نسله في قرار مكين. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it to be through the generation, through the couple, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they conceive the mother and so on. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make kind of a chain into your existence is your parents. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honoring the parents to be regarded in a very high position, because had it not been your parents, you do not exist. Therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pointing to you that Allah's gift upon you of your life It may be through your own parents that you should be grateful to, and honoring and obeying and so on. Okay? For this, Allah is the creator, but the creator made you to be through a chain that you go through is your parents. So this is the second reason by Allah's will of your existence in this world is your parents. قال فإن الأول فيه مرضاة الله والثاني فيه سخط الله. Then you have Allah's pleasure in obeying them and Allah's wrath in not doing so. فيقدم رضاهما على فعل ما يجب عليه من فروض الكفاية. Now when we come to the details, how to put their seeking their pleasure and obeying them. So how to seek their pleasure? By honoring them and by fulfilling what they ask you to do. That's the main thing. To be nice to them, to be honoring them, give them what they need, and so on. But the most important things, their rights are silent rights, and their rights comes with the communication. Silent rights, to honor them, to take care of them, to visit them, to ask about them, to see if they need, and this is our silent rights. You cannot say, for example, someone's parents, he does not, the person does not even visit them or call them. Someone is saying, did you do that? He said, oh, they didn't ask me to do so. Say that you don't need to be asked. These things are rights upon you without being asked. Those are innate in the life of a believer, if you can say. Now, by order of precedence, if they ask you to do, command you to do this, you have to say, I obey. How you please them. If they tell you, do this, can you get me this? If you're going to be answering in a nice way, ya abatah, ya ummah, things like in a very respectful way, and then you hasten to do what they do, so this is the obedience. But if you say no, so what they're going to say? It's like you're disobeying me, which is lead to displeasure. Now, what is the order of precedence in their command to be obeyed or not obeyed, to fulfill Allah's obligation of honoring them and obeying them. Among the scholars, the first thing is to have them above furud al-kifaya. Have them above furud al-kifaya. What are the furud al-kifaya? Is the collective obligation. The collective obligation, as we have explained it, if it's done by few of the member of the community, then the whole community is not, is spared from it, is not accountable for it. But none of the community or none of the member of the community fulfill this obligation, then the whole community will be accountable and punished for it. Furud al-kifaya, for example, attending Salat al-Janazah for a person is Fard kifaya. If there is Janazah, nobody attend, the whole community will be punished. Example. Now comes to the society, for example, having engineers or having doctors or things. For example, in a town, a small town, they need to have a doctor. If the whole town would not work to have a doctor to serve the community, then everyone will be, kind of blamed for it. Not punished, but blamed, because such a thing is not an obligation like it comes in the Sharia. But these things. So, the jihad, for example, which is a good example, because this is what the scholar they mentioned, the jihad which is go to if there is a call to fight in the sake of Allah, and going with the Muslim army, The jihad is furud kifaya. This is from the collective obligation. If there is enough people to join this army, then the rest of the community will not be blamed. But if there is nobody who will go out to join the army, then everybody will be blamed. So in this case, the one who has a parents to serve, the serving of the parents comes before joining the jihad. Well, why? Because it's a collective obligation, not the jihad is a collective obligation. Because in certain conditions, the jihad here, or the fighting in the sake of Allah, becomes an obligation that everyone should go. In certain condition, nobody will ask a permission. No child asking the parents, or spouse asking their spouse. Everybody has to. قَالَ انْفِرُوا. Everybody. which if we were in under Islamic society and governance, you know, what's happening in Gaza, you don't need to ask anybody. That's fardu ayn becomes. Allahumma salli. Allahumma salli. طيب. So حديث أنه جاء رجل يستأذن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في الجهاد. A man came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم asking him the permission to join him into one of the battles. قال أحي والداك? Are your parents alive? قال نعم. He said yes. قال ففيهما فجاهد. Go and make your jihad by helping, by be with them, serving them. So look, because here a collective obligation. So another soldier has been already, subhanAllah, the fulfillment of this collective obligation been already satisfied. So a person who comes and said, you have a parents, it's better to go to your parents. So that's the higher in the level of precedence in this case. قال وحديث أبي داود من حديث أبي سعيد أن رجلا هاجر إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من اليمن فقال يا رسول الله إني قد هاجرت قال هل لك أهل باليمن? A man came from the Yemen making his immigration to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said, I make my migration from Yemen. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, do you have parents? قال قال نعم. قال أبواي, my parents, I do. قال أذن لك? Did they give you the permission? قال لا. He said no. قال فارجع فاستأذنهما فإن أذن لك فجاهد وإلا فبرهما. Go back and ask their permission. If they give you the permission to join me for the jihad, then come. If not, stay with them and take care of them. حديث فيه مختلف, as he's saying. طيب. Therefore, we can here come as a conclusion, every collective obligation, you know, need to be under the commands or the requests of the parents, under the honoring of the parents, serving the parents. Okay? So if they tell you something, you said, okay, you think of yourself, you said, I need to obey my parents here. Because even your heart is driven toward this action that Allah is going to give you great reward for it. He said, Allah is going to give you greater reward if you fulfill what the Prophet ﷺ asked you. However, if it comes to things like فروض عين قال يتعين ترك الجهاد إذا لم يرضى الأبوين إلا فرض عين. فروض عين, the individual obligation. Salah is you going to pray and one of the parents will say to you, say, no, don't pray. You don't obey them here. Because this is Allah obligated on you. So here there is no obedience to the parents in such a thing. طيب. Most of the scholars رحمه الله تعالى قال أنه يجوز فعل فرض الكفاية والمندوب وإن لم يرضى الأبوان ما لم يتضرر بسبب فقد الولد وحملوا الأحاديث على المبالغة. And we have another opinion because it's very important to come to a conclusion. There's always the having to advance the taking care of the parents over the collective obligation, like the jihad. We're talking here example, very important and imminent, and has its high presence in the Islamic system as being called by the Prophet ﷺ the peak of Islam. قال وذروة سنامه الجهاد. So they said it's permissible to go to the jihad, even though the parents may not like it. You see, they say, because they said we can understand the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ قال المبالغة, to show how greatly important to obey your parents. Said even jihad, don't go, take care of them. But it comes a situation where you need to go. So they said with only one condition, if your absence will not hurt them. If your absence will not hurt them. Someone, for example, he left, his parents will say, we don't want you to go. But sometimes the parents are so emotional. They want them to go. Why? Because they want their child to be alive, to not get into things where they might, lose his life. So he said, I'm insisting to go in a nice way, and we go. He said, as long as their absence, his absence or the absence of the child will not hurt them, because there's nobody who's going to help them, nobody is going to take care of them, that it becomes haram. But if the absence of the child does not hurt or cause any harm or hardship for the parents, then in this case some of the scholars they say is permissible, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the only thing to not obey them, when they strive you to give you shirk or they ask you for the shirk, قال وإن جاهدك على أن تشرك بما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما. So that the sakhat of Allah, the wrath of Allah, is related to the shirk. To the shirk. If they push you to deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or to do things like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited, and so on. Let's come to the conclusion bi'idhnillahi ta'ala of all of that. So, قال في الآية, the ayah that we have mentioned, this is one of the greatest of the kaba'ir. And it has dalala, it has an evidence that على أنه يطيعهما في ترك فرض الكفاية والعين. Also, this is show us that an evidence that he should obey them, or she should obey them in not doing what is from the collective obligation. However, the consensus of the scholar, they all agreed about one thing about the individual obligation. Do not obey them when they ask you to not do something that is obligatory on you, like the salah, like the zakat, like the things like that. So that's the consensus. When it comes to furud al-kifayah, there is difference of opinion. So why we have a difference of opinion here? Because it's really the most important thing to regard here is the circumstances that you are in. It's like need to be studied by case. Because those who said you should go to the jihad, even though your parents do not, as long as your absence will not cause them hardship. So this is where someone is going to manage the situation. A person will manage the situation, for example, there is a situation that someone has to travel, for example. So he convinced them. He might, have them to prepare for them certain conditions so they will not be at hardship during his absence or during her absence. So it depends on the situation. As long as the parents are highly regarded, as the parents are heard, as the parents, the parents, be taken care of in the absence of the person, then someone will be in this condition permissible for them. The question, we have 2 minutes. When there's a conflict between the right of the father and the right of the mother, whom among them will be advanced? All the scholars, as per the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, is the right of the mother. As a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, قال يا رسول الله من أحق بحسن صحبتي, who the one who more أحق, more rightful, more deserving of my companionship, of serving them. And he talking about his mother and father. قال أمك, your mother. 3 times, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then after 3 times he said, then your father. And this is that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in hadith, he advanced the pleasure of the mother over the pleasure of the father. And we mentioned in the other hadith, does not mean that we ignore the father. The pleasure of the father or the honoring of the father or birrul ab is as great as birrul al-um. But she has an advantage. She has an advantage here based on, subhanallah, on her striving, on her difficulties, on her hardships she gets. Because al-ajr ala qadr al-mashaqqa, we have a ruling in the jurisprudence of the fiqh, the reward will be based on al-mashaqqa, the hardship you put in the prayer, or the hardship you put in the worship, not in the prayer. The more hardship in the worship, the more reward. Then the mother, she get more hardship, then she got more rights in her being obedient, obeyed, and being, honored. And he said, قال 3 times, and the author, the scholar, they said, الحمل والوضع والرضاع. This is big hardship. Pregnancy, delivery, and nursing. 3 times. Ummuk, ummuk, ummuk. Because after the 3, they become equal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it 2 times in the Quran. قال he's married, the human, his mother carried him كرها ووضعته كرها, with hardship, and she put him with hardship. And in the other ayah قال حملته وهنا على وهن, hardship over hardship. This is one of the three of rights that precede or advance, the mother will advance the father with based on that. Jazakumullah khair. We'll stop here. We'll continue the sharh of the hadith next time, and the sharh of the rest of the sharh. Barakallahu feekum. If anyone has a question, you are welcome.